The Franklin County Courthouse smelled faintly of polished oak and cold marble, its echoing halls filled with whispers that carried judgment sharper than any gavel. It was November, the kind of gray morning when the air outside bit against your skin, and inside the courthouse, every sound seemed amplified. My heels clicked once, twice, like measured rifle shots as I crossed the chamber, back straight, eyes steady. I wore a black suit cut with military precision, but even in civilian clothes I carried the bearing of a soldier. The way I scanned the exits, the way I measured every breath, it was instinct I could not unlearn. My family sat arrayed like an opposing unit. Mother, Margaret Miller, lips pressed in permanent disapproval. Paul, the golden son, leaning back with false confidence, and Hannah, delicate and practiced in her cruelty, looking as though she pitied me. They whispered to the lawyer at their table, Sterling Chase, a man with the smile of a wolf who smelled blood. When my eyes caught theirs, they did not see a daughter or a sister. They saw a problem to erase. The accusations began like rehearsed lines from a play. "She destroyed the trust of this company," Sterling announced, voice booming so all could hear. "Her paranoia has cost Miller Construction its reputation." Margaret leaned forward, voice shaking but sharp as glass. "She sees enemies where there are none. She has been this way since she was a child." Paul smirked, pushing forward a packet of edited footage projected onto the courtroom screen. The grainy video showed me walking into a warehouse, scanning lockers, checking corners, pulling boxes into the light with authority. The sound cut to my voice raised, issuing commands. Out of context, I looked like a woman spiraling out of control. "She planted cameras in bathrooms," Paul added, his voice dripping with contempt. "She recorded our employees without consent. That's not security, that's sickness." Hannah folded her arms, her voice a cruel echo of our childhood fights. "Even when we were kids, she'd check our backpacks after school, convinced we were stealing something. She's always been like this." The gallery stirred, murmurs filling the chamber. Every sound, every look was another nail being driven into the coffin of my reputation. I stood motionless, hands clasped before me, feeling the weight of their words but refusing to bend under them. Inside, my thoughts coiled tight like a spring. I was no longer a daughter, I told myself. I was an asset under investigation. The judge, an older woman with gray eyes that had seen decades of lies and truth mixed together, leaned forward. "Captain Miller, do you have a response to these accusations?" Her voice was calm, but I could sense the undercurrent. Even she had been affected by what she saw on that screen. To most, that video was evidence of instability. To me, it was another attempt to erase the context, to turn vigilance into madness. I glanced at my wrist. The watch, my grandfather's WWII Omega, ticked steadily, a reminder of who had trusted me when no one else would. When the bailiff asked me to remove it for the record, I refused. My silence was not weakness. It was rebellion. Margaret's voice cracked as she lost composure, the mask slipping into raw anger. "You've always been sick in the head," she shouted, her words echoing across the chamber. Gasps followed, the kind of collective intake of breath that seals humiliation into memory. For the first time that morning, I moved with intention. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a card, and set it on the polished oak table before me. The judge, the jury, my family all leaned forward to see. The logo gleamed silver against black, Sentinel Security Solutions. Beneath it, in bold, my name. "CEO," I said quietly, but the sound carried, slicing through the courtroom whispers. 500 million in contracts, clients in 23 countries. Some paranoia is just preparation. Gasps rippled through the room, and for a moment even Sterling Chase lost his smirk. My family froze, eyes widening, faces pale as if they had seen a ghost. I turned away from their silence, spine straight, chin level. But as I sat down, I caught the faintest smile tugging at the corner of my mouth when Sterling mentioned company losses. He didn't know it yet, but every lie they had told, every dismissal they had thrown at me, was about to unravel. The judge called a short recess, her gavel striking once against the block, a sound that cracked through the chamber like a gunshot. Lawyers shuffled papers, the gallery buzzed with low conversation, and my family huddled together, whispering like cornered conspirators. I sat alone at my table, hands folded, my watch ticking against the silence, and let my eyes drift to the marble floor. It was there, in the reflection of polished stone, that I saw not the courtroom but the shadow of years past. The memories pulled at me, dragging me back into the summers when I was just a girl, already seeing truths nobody wanted to face. The echoes of my mother's voice in the courtroom still clung to me, but memory has a cruel way of layering old wounds over new ones. Long before the courthouse, long before the contracts and medals, there was a little girl with sharp eyes and restless hands who was told again and again that seeing too much was the same as being broken. I was 8 the first time I caught someone stealing. Jimmy, the maintenance worker, moved like he thought no one was watching, but I was always watching. He slipped copper piping into the back of his truck, glancing around nervously. My family trusted him. Dad swore Jimmy was as loyal as kin, but I saw the twitch in his hands when he signed delivery slips. That twitch meant something. I followed him, clutching a disposable camera Grandpa had given me. Each snap of the shutter sounded like proof. I crouched behind a pallet of bricks, hands shaking, waiting for him to look away. When I showed the evidence to my father that night, he didn't even glance at the prints. "Jimmy's been with us 10 years, he said. "Don't you dare accuse him." Days later, thousands of dollars in material were gone, but instead of thanks, I was grounded. "You don't spy on adults," Mom snapped. "Do you want people thinking we raised a snoop?" At school, the whispers started early. Paul, the golden boy quarterback, and Hannah, the homecoming queen in training, laughed loudest. "Watchdog Dana," Paul taunted, and the name stuck. It was meant as mockery, but I wrote it down in a notebook hidden under my mattress. "Watchdog," I scribbled, underlined twice. A curse and maybe someday a shield. Hannah turned her beauty into approval. Paul turned his charm into glory. I turned suspicion into lists. While they were at parties or practice, I was tracing patterns. Workers leaving early, inventory counts that never matched, cracks in scaffolds before anyone else saw them. My notebooks filled with warnings that earned only scorn. Family dinners were battlegrounds. "Why can't you just relax?" Dad sighed every time I asked about invoices. "Because relaxing gets people killed," I muttered once. His hand slammed the table. "That mouth will ruin you." I would have drowned in silence if not for Grandpa Miller, a veteran with the stoop of age and the eyes of a man who had seen too much. He alone treated my questions as more than a nuisance. He'd sit beside me on the porch while I scribbled in my notebook. "You notice things," he told me. "Most people don't. In war, paranoid soldiers come home. Careless ones don't." One evening, he pulled an old deck of cards from his pocket. "Tell me what you see," he said. I described the way his fingers hesitated, how his eyes flicked left when he hid the ace. He smiled. "You read people like others read books. Don't let them take that away." It became our ritual. Every time the family mocked me, every time a teacher sent home another note about trust issues, Grandpa would shake his head. "Someday," he said, "they'll thank you for watching out. But children don't live on promises alone." By 10, I had no friends. Parents warned their kids that I would snitch, and classmates whispered that sitting with me was dangerous. At recess, I sat by the fence line, eyes on backpacks, shoes, the smallest tells. Isolation became routine, suspicion my comfort. At home, Paul and Hannah's laughter was merciless. They planted objects in each other's rooms so I would discover them, then mocked me when I sounded the alarm. See, she thinks we're all thieves. My parents laughed along. You're too much, Dana, always too much. The loneliness of those years carved something permanent. Every night I checked locks twice, counted windows 3 times, sat awake listening for footsteps. It wasn't fear, it was duty. If no one else would keep watch, I would. One night I overheard my parents whispering. She's not normal, Mom said. Dad's voice was tired. She'll grow out of it. But even then, deep down, I knew I wouldn't. I wanted their love, but I could not stop seeing the truth. And the truth was my family preferred lies. They would rather lie blind than admit the youngest Miller might see more clearly than the rest. By 12, I carried my notebooks everywhere. Pages filled with locks sketched from memory, license plates copied, notes about glances and nervous laughter. Grandpa would pat my shoulder. This gift is heavy, but it's yours. Don't bury it. The courtroom accusations in adulthood were nothing new. They were echoes of what had begun in childhood, when every warning I gave was met with ridicule and every truth became proof of my unworthiness. And as I sat in that Tennessee courthouse years later, watch ticking against my wrist, the memories of my childhood rose like smoke from a long smoldering fire. I knew exactly where part 2 of my life had begun, and I knew it was leading me toward the moment when all their lies would collapse. The scaffolding of Miller construction was built not only of steel but of denial, and one day, denial always breaks. The memory of that day, when I was 15 and the warnings turned into disaster, waited like a loaded chamber. And it was coming next. The years of notebooks and whispers pressed against me like invisible weights, and by the summer I turned 15. Those burdens collided with the steel and scaffolds of Miller construction. My parents thought a summer job would teach me responsibility, but I knew it was another chance for them to watch me fail. The site smelled of sawdust and hot metal. Workers shouted across beams, hammers rang like warning bells, and I felt the hum of danger in every unfinished joint. My eyes locked on the scaffolding, bolts loose, boards trembling with each step. I saw the way the foreman hurried men to work faster, how he ignored safety nets to save time. The patterns were the same ones I had traced since childhood. I told the site manager. He laughed, clapping my shoulder. You're just like your old man, too cautious. These things are built to last. When I told Dad, his patience cracked. Stop scaring the workers with doomsday nonsense, he snapped. Hannah mocked me at dinner. She just wants attention, she said, her voice sweet enough to cut. Paul chimed in. Little Inspector strikes again. But the bolts told their own story. I wrote down every detail, missing clamps, overloaded platforms, the way the scaffolding swayed when the wind picked up. I could hear the future in the groans of steel. Still, no one listened. It was just after sunrise when the air shifted. Workers climbed the 3-story frame, balancing with coffee in their hands. I glanced up and felt the dread coil inside me. One bolt shimmered in the morning light, twisting against strain. My throat tightened. Get down! I screamed, my voice breaking across the site. For a moment, only silence. Then the world collapsed. The scaffolding gave way with a roar, beams tumbling like dominoes, dust exploding into the air. Men shouted, a chorus of terror. I saw Marcus Rodriguez, father of 3, dangling, his foot caught between bars. Without thinking, I ran, pulling with everything I had. The structure crashed behind us, debris raining down as I dragged him into the open. Blood streaked down my arms, glass shards tearing skin, but I didn't stop until EMTs rushed in. Marcus clutched my hand, his face pale. You saved me, he whispered. I shook my head, unable to speak, heart pounding in my ears. But gratitude was not the story my family told. By evening, a whisper's twisted truth. Dana's screaming caused panic, the lawyers claimed. She made men slip in their hurry. At dinner, Dad's jaw was tight. "Do you understand what you've done? You embarrassed us." In town, neighbors repeated it. "That Miller girl is trouble," they muttered. Even as Marcus limped past with a crutch, thanking me with his eyes, the lie grew larger than the truth. Grandpa sat with me that night on the porch, my arms bandaged. His silence was heavy before he finally spoke. "I saw what happened. You were right." He pulled a notebook from his coat, the one he had begun keeping years before. In it, he had written every warning I gave, every theft I spotted, every disaster predicted and ignored. "Someday," he said, placing the notebook in my lap, "this record will matter. One day no one will be able to deny it." I traced the handwriting, realizing he had been my only witness all along. The notebook wasn't just his, it was ours. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that being Watchdog wasn't madness, but survival. Still, the family never forgave me for that day. To them, I was the reason lawsuits followed, the reason insurance claims piled up. No one mentioned that my warnings had been written down, time-stamped, undeniable. They buried truth under convenience. The scars on my arms healed, but the mark inside did not. I learned that saving someone's life was not enough to be believed. Their world was safer when I was wrong. That summer ended with more distance than ever between me and the Millers. At school, whispers multiplied, kids repeating what their parents said. "Don't get too close to her. She causes accidents." At home, I ate meals in silence, the notebooks my only confidants. But under the weight of isolation, determination formed. If they would not listen, then I would take my vigilance somewhere it was needed. If the Millers thought Watchdog was a curse, maybe the army would know it was a weapon. The sound of collapsing steel never left me. It became the echo that carried me forward, a reminder of the price of being ignored. As I looked down at the scars that still lined my skin, I understood. The next chapter of my life would not be spent begging to be believed. It would be spent proving that vigilance could save lives. The courthouse years later, the accusations and humiliation, all of it was built on this moment. But at 15, I could not yet see the path ahead. I only knew I had to leave. The army was waiting, its gates open to a girl desperate to turn suspicion into purpose. And the day I walked into the recruiter's office, the next part of my story began. The memory of the scaffold collapse clung to me like the scars on my arms. I carried it through the last years of high school, each whisper of troublemaker or crazy girl driving me further from the family that should have defended me. By the time I turned 18, the walls of Miller Construction felt like a prison built from denial. If they would not trust my vigilance, then I would take it somewhere it mattered. The Army recruiter's office smelled of ink and old carpet, but to me it was freedom. The sergeant behind the desk studied my transcript, the notes about disciplinary issues and paranoia. His eyes narrowed. "You really want military police?" I nodded. "I want to protect people who will let me." He leaned back, weighing me, and finally grinned. "Then MP it is." My parents treated the news like a relief. "Finally, somewhere for crazy people," Paul sneered. Hannah laughed. Mom muttered that at least the army might straighten me out. Only Grandpa hugged me at the bus station. His grip was frail, but his voice steady. "Make me proud, Watchdog." The Omega watch ticked on my wrist as the bus pulled away, a reminder that someone believed in me. Fort Leonard Wood was a crucible. The Missouri heat wrapped around us like a punishment, and the drill sergeants wasted no time. My vigilance made me a target. "You, Miller," one bellowed. "Why are you scanning the sky? Looking for UFOs?" The platoon laughed. I kept scanning. On the obstacle course, I checked harnesses twice, ropes 3 times. "Paranoid," the others muttered. But when a recruit's buckle slipped, I was the one who caught him before he fell. During a training exercise, instructors staged a mock terrorist infiltration. Most recruits followed procedure blindly. I noticed the same delivery truck circling the perimeter twice, the driver's hand tapping on the wheel in coded rhythm. I sounded the alarm. Drill sergeants stormed the vehicle and pulled out the role players with fake explosives. Later, the sergeant major called me aside. "You saw what nobody else did. That's not paranoia, that's survival." It was the first time in my life authority praised my instincts instead of punishing them. The word watchdog began to spread again, but this time as respect. Soldiers muttered it in the chow hall, half in awe, half in relief. Deployment came fast. Iraq, 2015, Forward Operating Base Liberty. The desert stretched endless and hostile, the air heavy with dust and diesel. My unit was tasked with base security and convoy protection. Most nights were quiet, the kind that lulled soldiers into complacency. But not me. I walked the wire, watched shadows, noted every flicker of light beyond the gates. One evening I caught it, a shadow moving against the wrong direction of the setting sun. My skin prickled. I stopped a vendor's cart approaching the checkpoint. The men groaned. "It's just bread, watchdog, let him through." I opened the crate anyway. Beneath the loaves, a 200-pound IED wired for detonation. The driver bolted, but MPs tackled him before he could trigger it. 30 soldiers lived because I trusted the unease no one else felt. The commendation medal they pinned on me afterward was small compared to the weight of those 30 lives. That night my squad looked at me differently. One of them, Sergeant Williams, asked quietly, "Why so thorough? Why never let up?" I answered without hesitation, "Because you're worth coming home." He nodded, and from then on, suspicion became loyalty. Letters home carried my news, but silence was the reply. 3 months without acknowledgement. Finally, Hannah sent a single text. "Mom says don't send Army stuff anymore." I stared at the screen, the metal heavy in my hand, and realized they were embarrassed by my success. So I stopped writing. Instead, I poured myself into the family I had found, the brothers and sisters in uniform who trusted me not in spite of my vigilance, but because of it. Around them, I wasn't the paranoid daughter. I was the watchdog who kept them alive. For the first time, I understood the difference between being wanted and being needed, and I chose the latter. But the war was not done shaping me. Ahead lay Kabul, a night of fire and siege that would brand my name forever in the records of the military police. The memory of steel collapsing at home had driven me here, but the storm waiting in Afghanistan would prove once and for all whether vigilance could truly save those who depended on it. The desert of Iraq had tested me, but Kabul would redefine me. When my unit transferred to Afghanistan in 2017, I was assigned to embassy security during fragile peace talks. The city's skyline was jagged with half-built towers and broken windows, a reminder of decades of war. The compound I guarded held diplomats, civilians, and soldiers who trusted the gates to keep death out. But I knew better. Gates delay. They never stop. I was night shift commander, responsible for 8 MPs and a dozen Afghan police. The compound was quiet in those first hours of darkness, the kind of stillness that made ordinary people relax. I never relaxed. My eyes stayed on the monitors, watching patterns most overlooked, the pacing of guards, the rhythm of headlights, the sudden silence of stray dogs. That night, something felt off. The dogs outside the wire, usually restless, had gone silent. On the monitors, a cell tower blinked irregularly, a stutter that made my skin prickle. I called the alert. "Positions! Something's coming!" Some rolled their eyes, muttered about my nerves, but I heard the edge in their voices. The first shot cracked the silence, glass shattering in the guard tower. Then fire poured from 3 directions, snipers cutting through the compound's edges. Civilians screamed inside the main hall as bullets sparked against walls. My radio buzzed with panicked voices, but my own stayed steady. "Cover the west gate. Reroute civilians to the inner chamber. No one moves alone. For 8 hours, the compound turned into a battlefield. Suicide bombers drove trucks toward the gate, their headlights blinding. I coordinated fire teams, pulling Afghan police back into defensive lines, ordering MPs to cover every breach. Twice I left the command post myself, sprinting through dust and chaos to drag men into cover. A piece of shrapnel ripped into my shoulder, heat blooming across my uniform, but I tightened the tourniquet myself and kept moving. The worst came when word spread that a diplomat's 5-year-old daughter had been separated from her parents during evacuation. My stomach dropped, but my feet were already moving. I crawled through rubble under sniper fire, the smell of burning plastic thick in my lungs, until I found her huddled near a broken wall, hands pressed to her ears. She was shaking, too stunned to scream. I scooped her up, shielding her as mortar fire rained nearby. Dust and blood covered us both when I carried her back through the compound, her small body pressed tight against mine. One image of that night would follow me forever. A photo snapped by an embassy worker of me, uniform torn, face streaked red, carrying the child through smoke. The picture went viral, hailed as heroism. My family never mentioned it. When dawn broke, the siege ended. Bodies of attackers lay scattered outside the walls. Inside, every civilian was alive. Not one had been lost. My soldiers whispered among themselves, half in awe, half in relief. She sees danger before it breathes. The Afghan police gave me a name, Harry's, their word for guardian. The army pinned another medal to my chest, the Military Police Regimental Association Award, citing extraordinary heroism. To the outside world, it was proof of valor. To me, it was proof that vigilance could save hundreds, even in the darkest hours. Yet when I called home that night, voice still hoarse from smoke, I was met with silence. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, "I stopped a massacre. I saved children." Her response was ice. "We don't celebrate killing, Dana." Dad's voice floated faintly in the background. "Your brother just got promoted to site manager." Hannah chimed in later, her tone casual, cutting. "When are you coming back to normal life?" I hung up staring at the blood still drying on my hands, realizing again that nothing I did would ever be enough for them. Among my soldiers, though, I was no longer the paranoid girl. I was their watchdog, the one who never closed her eyes, the one who brought them home. It was a title I carried with pride, even as the weight of family rejection pressed heavier than any shrapnel wound. The courthouse years later, when they branded me unstable and unfit, was built on the foundation of these nights. And though Kabul had proven me, the break in my heart was still waiting to come, because the next call home would shatter what little hope I had left. The image of Kabul never left me, smoke curling in the night sky, the child's small body clinging to mine. But medals and photographs don't silence the ache of rejection. When I returned stateside, the Army honored me in ways my family never had. I was nominated for Military Police Officer of the Year, and for one brief moment, I let myself believe recognition might bridge the chasm between me and the Millers. The Pentagon ceremony was held under dazzling lights, a sea of uniforms and polished shoes. I stood in my dress blues, ribbons catching the glare, posture locked. Generals shook my hand, reporters scribbled notes, flashes burst like fireworks. Yet when I looked to the section reserved for family, the seats were empty. Not even a card, not even a token gesture. Still, I kept my chin high. Soldiers don't flinch. After the ceremony, I stepped outside into the cold air, phone in my hand. My pulse raced as I dialed home. Mom answered after several rings, her tone flat. "Dana." "Mom, I won the highest MP award," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "They said I saved lives, hundreds of lives." Her words sliced through me. "Dana, we've discussed this. We don't want to hear about your activities." "Activities?" My throat tightened. I'm protecting people. You're trained to hurt people, she snapped. That's not something we celebrate in this family. I could hear Dad in the background, dismissive, almost annoyed. She's embarrassing us with neighbors. Then Hannah's voice cut in, smooth and cruel. People ask why our sister became a killer. Maybe stop calling. The line that broke me came quiet, almost casual. We'd prefer if you didn't mention us in interviews. I stood frozen on the Pentagon steps, the phone cold against my ear, the glow of the city blurred, headlights streaking across the avenue. For years, I had carried the hope that one victory, one undeniable act of valor might be enough. That hope died in that moment. The next morning, a package arrived. Brown paper, Tennessee postmark. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was my grandfather's watch, its face worn from decades of use, and a copy of his Purple Heart citation. Tucked between them was a note in his uneven hand. Keep watching over others. Someday they'll see what I see. Your parents don't understand soldiers. I do. I sat with it for a long time, winding the watch, listening to the steady tick like a heartbeat. My chest ached with a mix of grief and relief. Grandpa's faith was the only rope holding me steady. For once, I wasn't crazy. I was seen. Then came the call I feared, Hannah's voice uncharacteristically soft. Dana, Grandpa's in the hospital. He asked for you. Within hours, I filed for emergency leave. The Army approved. On the flight to Tennessee, the engines roared like artillery, drowning the storm inside my chest. I hadn't been home in 3 years. I pressed the watch to my wrist, whispering under my breath, I'm coming, Grandpa, hold on. At the hospital, Grandpa's skin was pale, his breath shallow. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, but his eyes still burned sharp when they met mine. He motioned for me to lean close. They don't deserve you, Dana. His hand gripped mine with surprising strength. I've been documenting everything, every warning you gave, every time you were right. I'm leaving you something that'll change everything. I shook my head, tears falling freely now. I don't want the company. It's not about wanting, he whispered. It's about protecting what matters. Days later, he passed. At the lawyer's office, I was handed a sealed envelope, instructions written in his familiar scrawl, open after the funeral. Bring your military records. My heart pounded as I held it, the weight heavier than any metal. Inside was more than inheritance. It was trust, belief, a vindication I had waited my entire life to feel. The watch ticked steady on my wrist, as though marking time until the truth would surface. But truth never comes easy. As I prepared for the funeral and the will reading, I knew the family would strike back, claws sharpened, ready to erase me once more. And what waited at that graveside would ignite the next battle in a war I had never chosen, but could no longer avoid. The package with Grandpa's handwriting still lay heavy in my bag as I stepped onto Tennessee soil again. The air smelled of wet leaves and coal smoke, a scent that carried me straight back to childhood. 3 years away hadn't softened the edges. Home wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield where every word could be another ambush. The funeral took place under a November sky the color of slate. Rows of folding chairs lined the family cemetery, veterans standing at attention in their old uniforms. I walked in wearing dress blues, the metals catching dull light, and the murmurs began at once. Some nodded with respect, whispering about Cabell. Others turned away, their loyalty fixed to the Millers who had long since disowned me. I saluted as the flag was folded, every movement measured, but from the corner of my eye I saw Paul lean toward Hannah, lips curling into a sneer. "Show off," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Hannah gave a brittle laugh, pretending to dab at her eyes. Mother sat stone-faced, eyes red but not from grief, her gaze fixed on me with something closer to contempt than mourning. After the service, townsfolk pressed my hands, thanked me for service, spoke of pride. Each thank you was a wound in my family's pride. I saw it in the way my mother's lips thinned, in Paul's clenched fists, in Hannah's trembling smile. For them, my uniform was a costume, an insult to their version of truth. At the family home, nothing had changed except my absence. My room was stripped bare, storage boxes stacked where my childhood bed had been. "You can stay in the guest room," Mom said sharply, "if you behave." The rules were quick and cold. No uniforms at the table, no war stories, no talk about that company metal nonsense. I nodded silently, already counting the locks on the windows out of habit. When the day of the will reading arrived, I walked into Mitchell and Sons, the old law office my grandfather had trusted for decades. James Mitchell himself, gray-haired and steady, presided over the long oak table. My family sat across from me, their lawyer Sterling Chase at their side, ready to strike. The first part of the will unfolded predictably. The family house to Mom, equipment to Paul, investments to Hannah. Each announcement met with nods of satisfaction. Then Mitchell cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and spoke words that cracked the room open. "To my granddaughter, Dana Louise Miller, I leave 40% controlling interest in Miller Construction." The silence was total, broken only by Hannah's sharp intake of breath. Paul slammed his hand against the table. "She abandoned us for the army. She doesn't deserve a cent." Mom's voice rose shrill. "He was manipulated. He wasn't in his right mind." Mitchell lifted a second envelope, sealed and marked with my name. "Additionally, Dana inherits all personal documents and records Mr. Miller compiled over the last 15 years. His instructions were explicit." I accepted the envelope with steady hands, though my heart thundered. My family's faces twisted into outrage and fear. They knew what Grandpa's records contained. Every theft I had documented, every warning ignored, every accident they had blamed on me, written in his hand, preserved in his files. "You'll ruin us with your paranoia." Hannah spat, her voice shrill with desperation. Paul leaned forward, face red. "We'll contest this. Sterling will tear it apart. You're unstable, Dana. Everyone knows it." I looked at them, calm as ever, my watch ticking faintly in the silence. "I don't want your company," I said evenly, "but I won't let you destroy what Grandpa built." Mitchell slid forward a folder thick with papers. "Financial records show Miller Construction has lost over $200,000 annually to theft and mismanagement. Mr. Miller documented each incident." The room erupted. Hannah burst into tears. Paul swore under his breath. Mom hissed threats about court battles. Sterling Chase leaned back in his chair with a predator's smile. "We'll contest. PTSD makes her unfit. Everyone will see it." Their plan was clear. Erase me again, this time with legal firepower. But I had learned long ago that denial was a fragile structure, and truth had a way of collapsing it. I tucked the envelope against my chest, its weight a promise. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory. One day, no one will be able to deny it. The funeral had been about goodbye. The will reading was about war. And as I stepped into the cold evening air, I knew the next battle would not be fought with rifles or medals. It would be fought in court, where edited videos and poisoned words could wound deeper than bullets. The courthouse lights in my mind flickered again, dragging me forward. What came next was not grief, but ambush. The will reading had ended like a battlefield skirmish. Shouts, accusations, and the promise of war. I walked out of Mitchell and Sons with Grandpa's envelope pressed against my chest, but I knew it wasn't safety. It was a target. By the following week, the family had filed to contest the will, claiming my military service left me mentally unfit to inherit. So once again, I found myself back inside the courthouse. The Franklin County Superior Court was colder than the one I remembered as a child, though maybe it was just the weight of what waited inside. The gallery was packed, townsfolk, reporters and old acquaintances whispering about the unstable veteran fighting her own blood. Sterling Chase, my family's chosen blade, adjusted his cufflinks at the plaintiff's table. His smirk said he was ready to gut me. Judge Patricia Hawkins presided, a woman with sharp eyes and the calm of someone who had worn a uniform herself decades earlier. She studied me carefully when I entered. My black suit fit like armor, the Omega watch gleaming faintly on my wrist. I met her gaze without blinking. Sterling rose with theatrical confidence. "Your Honor, Exhibit A." The screen behind him flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the courtroom, me in an army barracks, shouting, knocking over a chair, voice raw. "I can't trust anyone, they're all lying." The clip cut suddenly, ending on my face twisted in fury. The room erupted in murmurs. Hannah buried her face in a tissue, sobbing for the jury. Paul leaned forward, expression solemn. My mother's voice cracked with rehearsed heartbreak. "We've tried to help her, but she's dangerous. She sees threats everywhere." Sterling pressed his advantage. "This is a pattern. From childhood spying to paranoia in adolescence to mental breaks in service. Now she seeks control of a multi-million-dollar company. Would you put the safety of workers and finances in the hands of someone this unstable?" I didn't move. My spine stayed straight, my hands folded. Silence was my shield. Inside, rage pulsed hot, but discipline held it back. They wanted me to break, to shout, to prove their point. I gave them nothing. Judge Hawkins leaned forward. "Captain Miller, do you wish to respond?" "Not yet. Your Honor," my lawyer Marcus Finch replied smoothly. A veteran himself, Finch had the calm of a man who had seen too many ambushes to flinch at this one. He slipped me a note. Patience. Let them overreach. Sterling wasn't finished. He called a childhood counselor who testified that I struggled with trust at age 9. He summoned a high school teacher who remembered me accusing classmates of cheating. Every story was framed as proof of madness. My warnings at the construction site, panic that caused injuries. My service record, obsession that endangered fellow soldiers. Each lie cut, not because it was new, but because it was familiar. They were weaponizing every scar, every moment I had lived through, twisting it until even the truth seemed corrupted. My stomach tightened, but my eyes stayed locked on the judge. During recess, I sat alone at the defense table. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. A clipped military voice came through. "Sergeant Miller, this is Colonel Martinez, JAG Corps. We're aware of the footage presented in court. That material was classified. Its leak is under investigation. Justice is coming." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, the words echoing. Someone out there knew the truth. Someone was fighting for me. Back in session, Sterling's confidence swelled. He leaned into the jury box, voice soft, persuasive. "She was called Watchdog as a child, but even a watchdog can bite the hand that feeds it. Do you really want to hand her control?" Gasps filled the room. My family sat taller, convinced they had cornered me. I touched the watch on my wrist, steady tick grounding me. Grandpa's voice whispered from memory, "Trust the record. The truth will outlast the lies." I exhaled slowly, letting their performance wash over me. This was their ambush, but the counterstrike hadn't arrived yet. I knew it was coming, the witness they hadn't accounted for, the truth they thought buried. When the judge adjourned for the day, Sterling walked past my table with a grin. "It's over, Captain. Tomorrow we finish you." I met his gaze without a flicker. "Tomorrow," I said, voice low but steady, "you'll see why Watchdog never sleeps." The gavel struck. The courtroom emptied. But I stayed still, the Omega watch ticking loud in the silence. The morning after Sterling's ambush, the courthouse hummed like a hive. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones reaching for scraps. Inside, the jury shuffled back into their box, faces tight with the weight of yesterday's spectacle. My family leaned forward, certain the momentum was theirs. Sterling adjusted his tie, confidence radiating. He thought the trap had sprung clean. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Boots struck the marble with precision. A tall man in full dress uniform stepped inside, chest heavy with ribbons, posture radiating authority. The gallery fell silent. Sergeant Major Malik Owens. My partner in Iraq, my shadow in Afghanistan, the only man alive who had stood beside me through 47 missions. Sterling shot to his feet. Objection, this witness was not disclosed. Judge Hawkins raised a brow. Overruled, this court will hear him. Owens took the stand, his voice steady, resonant. My name is Sergeant Major Malik Owens, 20 years service, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. I served as Captain Miller's partner in the military police from Iraq through Afghanistan. His eyes swept across the jury. I am here to correct lies. He gestured toward the screen where Sterling's footage had played. That so-called breakdown, that was not instability, that was crisis intervention. He paused, letting silence settle. Private Johnson had loaded his rifle. He planned to end his life that night. Captain Miller was the only one who noticed. She confronted him, talked him down, disarmed him. The shouting, the overturned chair, that was her stopping a suicide. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Hannah's tears faltered. Paul shifted uneasily. Sterling's jaw tightened. Owens continued, voice hard. Private Johnson is alive today, married, 2 children. He called Captain Miller last week to thank her again. He pulled a phone from his pocket. He left a message. The judge allowed it. The courtroom speakers crackled, then Johnson's voice filled the chamber. Dana, you saved my life that night. You didn't look crazy, you looked like an angel. The room shifted. The jury leaned forward, listening intently. The gallery murmured with disbelief, then admiration. Owens wasn't finished. I served with Captain Miller in 12 countries. Under her watch, not a single soldier was lost. She spotted IEDs before they detonated, stopped infiltrators before they breached perimeters, prevented 17 security lapses. They called her Watchdog because she never let her guard down. And because of that, hundreds of us came home. He locked eyes with Sterling. You want to call that paranoia? I call it professionalism. Then came the revelation that cut deeper than any metal. I was with her in Kabul, the night of the embassy siege. She saw the attack pattern hours before it started. She refused to abandon civilians when others wanted to retreat. She carried a child through mortar fire, and she saved my life in Fallujah years before that, pulling me from a burning convoy. His voice cracked for the first time. I am here today because she never stopped watching. Silence weighed heavy until the judge herself leaned forward. Is there any reason this court should doubt your testimony, Sergeant Major? Owens straightened. None, Your Honor. My career speaks for itself, and so does hers. Sterling scrambled, his voice sharp with desperation. So what? Soldiers cover for each other. This is loyalty, not truth. Owens turned on him, his tone like steel. No, sir, this is truth. Loyalty is just why I showed up to deliver it. The jury's faces told the story. Doubt in me had become doubt in my accusers. For the first time, my family's confidence wavered. Hannah's mascara streaked her cheeks. Paul whispered furiously to Sterling. My mother stared at the floor, silent for once. The gavel struck. Court will reconvene after recess, Judge Hawkins announced, but the shift was already made. As the gallery emptied, Owens crossed to me, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. His words were low, meant only for me. This isn't over, Dana, but they can't bury the truth forever. Your grandfather made sure of that. The envelope in my bag felt heavier than ever. His mention of Grandpa wasn't random. It was a signal there was more to come, more evidence waiting to surface. I sat back down, the Omega watch ticking steady. The trap Sterling thought he'd sprung was unraveling. Ahead lay the sealed documents, the proof Grandpa had hidden, waiting for the right moment. And when those pages came into the light, even the Millers would not escape them. The recess ended with a heaviness in the air. Owens's testimony had rattled the courtroom, but I knew the battle wasn't won. Truth needed proof, not just memory, and that proof sat in the sealed envelope my grandfather had left behind. When Judge Hawkins returned to the bench, Mitchell, my grandfather's lawyer, rose with quiet authority. "Your Honor," he said, holding up the envelope, "this was entrusted to me by Mr. Harold Miller with instructions that it be opened only in this courtroom in the presence of his granddaughter." Sterling objected instantly. "Irrelevant, this is theatrics." Judge Hawkins silenced him with a sharp look. "Proceed." Mitchell broke the seal, pulling out a folder and, to my surprise, a small object wrapped in cloth. He laid it on the table. My breath caught when he unfolded the cloth. My grandfather's Omega watch gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but the back was different, slightly thicker, the edge grooved. "Mr. Miller had this modified," Mitchell explained. "A hidden compartment." He pressed a latch and the back popped open. Inside was a tiny micro SD card and a folded note. The judge nodded to the bailiff, who delivered the card to the technician. Moments later, images filled the screen, photographs of construction sites dated and time-stamped. Bolts missing, scaffolds unstable, workers ignoring safety rules. Each image was followed by my handwritten notes, preserved by my grandfather. The room gasped as video clips played, showing workers stealing materials, trucks leaving at night. "This," Mitchell said firmly, "is 15 years of documentation. Mr. Miller verified every one of Dana Miller's warnings." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. My notebooks, my words, the evidence no one had wanted to see. Grandpa had saved them all. Then came the scaffold collapse footage. A grainy video, but clear enough to show me pulling Marcus Rodriguez from the wreckage as beams crashed around us. Gasps erupted. "She saved him," someone whispered. The next file was a ledger in Grandpa's handwriting. Each year marked losses, over 200,000 stolen or wasted. Next to each, his notes: Dana reported, ignored. Insurance claims filed after unforeseeable accidents. His comments, all preventable, all silenced. Sterling tried to interrupt. "This doesn't prove..." But Mitchell cut him off. "It proves a pattern. She wasn't paranoid, she was right." The judge read from the folded note, her voice softened. "Dana, you were never the problem. You were the solution they were too proud to accept. This company needs a guardian. You've earned it through blood, tears, and truth. Don't let them erase your gift." My throat tightened. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice, steady and certain. The courtroom murmured, shifting like a tide. Workers from the gallery leaned forward, whispering that they remembered my warnings. A man rose, Marcus Rodriguez, limping slightly. "She saved my life. You blamed her." The judge silenced the outburst, but not before the words landed heavy in the room. Mitchell wasn't finished. He drew out another bundle of papers, records of phone calls Grandpa had logged. Insurance companies received 47 calls from MS, Miller warning about hazards. Each time, family members called afterward to discredit her. These logs proved deliberate suppression. The jurors exchanged glances. One woman wiped her eyes. Another man leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. Sterling scrambled, flipping papers. This is one man's obsession, a dying old man's delusion. But the judge's face told a different story. She leaned towards Sterling. "Or it's a record of truth your clients buried." The family sat pale, eyes darting. Hannah whispered furiously to Paul. My mother pressed a handkerchief to her mouth, shaking her head. For the first time, they looked cornered. I sat still, the Omega watch ticking steadily on the table. Every second was vindication. Every tick was another reminder that Grandpa had never doubted me. The judge called for order. "This evidence is overwhelming. Tomorrow we will hear Captain Miller's testimony. The gavel struck, but the sound was different this time. Not a weapon against me, but a drumbeat of change. As the court emptied, Sterling's swagger was gone. My family moved like shadows, clutching each other. I stayed seated, hand on the watch, feeling its weight. Grandpa had given me more than inheritance. He had given me the truth. And tomorrow, it would be my turn to speak it aloud, with the precision of a soldier who had spent her life watching. The courthouse doors closed behind me that evening, but I already felt the pull of the next day. My words would be bullets, my testimony the rifle. The war in the courtroom wasn't over. The next morning the courthouse air felt sharper, as if even the walls were waiting. Yesterday had belonged to my grandfather's voice from beyond the grave. Today would be mine. Judge Hawkins called the court to order, her gavel echoing like a drumbeat. "Captain Miller," she said, "please take the stand." I rose slowly, the Omega watch ticking against my wrist like a reminder of the cost of silence. Crossing the aisle, I could feel every eye on me, the jury leaning forward, the gallery of townsfolk whispering, my family staring with thinly veiled panic. I took the oath and sat, posture straight, breath steady. My lawyer nodded. "Captain Miller, you've heard the accusations against you. Tell the court who you are." I spoke clearly. "My name is Sergeant First Class Dana Miller. For 10 years I served as military police. I protected embassies, convoys, and soldiers across 12 countries. Under my watch, no one was lost." I let the words settle, then added, "They called me paranoid, the army called me watchdog." I described Iraq, the bread cart hiding an IED. Afghanistan, the embassy siege, the diplomat's daughter in my arms. I told them of the medals pinned to my chest, each one earned not from chance but from vigilance. My voice never wavered. "I've been accused of being obsessive. They are right. I am obsessive because obsession saves lives." The jury listened in silence. I turned toward them. "But what my family calls paranoia, Fortune 500 companies call security. Sentinel Security Solutions, my company, protects embassies, corporations, and communities worldwide. We oversee billions in assets. My team of nearly 3,000 prevents breaches before they happen. Last year alone, we stopped 24 insider thefts, identified vulnerabilities in corporate networks, and safeguarded lives. That company is valued at $500 million. I built it from the very instincts my family mocked." Sterling shifted, visibly rattled. "So what you're saying is—" I cut him off. "What I'm saying is that the very flaw they tried to bury is the foundation of an empire that protects people they'll never meet." I pulled a folder from my briefcase. 3 years ago, without their knowledge, I began monitoring Miller Construction. With my own money, I paid for remote surveillance, background checks, and threat assessments. In that time, I prevented 7 thefts and 4 major safety violations. They never knew it, but I've been protecting them all along. Gasps swept through the gallery. Paul's face went red, Hannah's hands shook, and my mother's lips parted in silent horror. The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying you've been funding private oversight of Miller Construction?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. $50,000 a year out of my own pocket, because even when they called me paranoid, I couldn't watch them burn down what Grandpa built. I stood, asking permission. The judge allowed it. I pointed around the courtroom, eyes sharp. 4 exits, evacuation time 3 minutes, south window vulnerable. 2 men in the gallery showing elevated stress, hands fidgeting, eyes scanning. These observations took me 30 seconds. This is what I do. This is who I am. The jury shifted, impressed. The judge herself blinked in surprise. "How did you see all that?" "Because I never stop watching," I answered. "And because people's lives depend on it." Then I turned to my family, my voice steady but edged with steel. "Mom, I spent 15 years trying to protect you. You called me paranoid. Paul, I saved Marcus Rodriguez's life. You blamed me for the accident. Hannah, I stopped 7 thefts from destroying this company. You called me a problem child. I paused, the silence deep. I don't need your approval anymore, but I will not let you destroy what Grandpa built. Sterling tried to recover. Your Honor, this is a performance. Judge Hawkins raised her hand. Sit down, Mr. Chase. The gallery erupted with murmurs, workers whispering agreement, veterans nodding. Even the jury seemed galvanized, pens scratching faster on notepads. A few spectators rose to their feet, clapping until the bailiff barked for silence. Then the bailiff entered, handing the judge a phone. Emergency call from the Pentagon, Your Honor. The courtroom froze. The judge listened, then cleared her throat. For the record, this is General Patricia Morrison. She wishes the court to know that Captain Dana Miller is under review for the Medal of Honor for extraordinary heroism in Kabul. The silence that followed was absolute. My family stared as if the ground had given way beneath them. Sterling's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Paul slumped in his chair. Hannah shook her head as if refusing to believe. My mother looked like the life had drained from her. I lowered my gaze, the watch ticking steady. The time for hiding was over. Tomorrow would bring the verdict, but I already knew the tide had turned. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. The gavel still echoed in my ears as the courtroom emptied, but my heart knew the real battle was finished. The tide had turned. The truth, long buried under lies and shame, now stood in daylight. By the time the verdict came, it only confirmed what had already been decided in spirit. 40% of Miller Construction was mine, my family's accusations dismissed with prejudice. But more than inheritance, I had won something far greater, vindication. 1 year later, the headquarters of Miller Construction looked nothing like the company I had grown up around. The cracked walls and sloppy practices were gone. In their place, rose glass walls, transparent offices, and safety procedures that hummed like a living organism. The air no longer reeked of shortcuts and negligence. It carried the weight of responsibility. Financial records told the story best. From nearly $1 million in yearly losses, the company had turned a profit of over $1 million. Retention was at an all-time high, workers smiling instead of muttering in fear. A culture of accountability had taken root. I walked those halls not as the paranoid daughter they had mocked, but as the guardian who had rebuilt what they tried to destroy. I hadn't done it alone. Marcus Rodriguez, once the man I pulled from collapsing scaffolding, now served as general manager. Malik Owens took charge of security, his steady voice grounding every policy we implemented. Veterans filled leadership roles, bringing both discipline and compassion. For the first time in decades, Miller Construction was respected, trusted by clients and beloved by workers. As for my family, they existed in the periphery. My mother had left Tennessee for Florida, her calls rare and stiff. Paul handled equipment maintenance under supervision, stripped of decision-making power. Hannah worked in client relations, her bitterness palpable but contained. I no longer expected reconciliation. Some wounds are not meant to heal, but the company survived because their influence had been reduced to shadows. The Omega watch remained on my wrist every morning, a ritual. Each day I wound it, listening to the tick steady as breath. On my desk, a plaque engraved with Grandpa's words read, "Time and truth are allies." His presence lingered in every safety inspection, in every life saved from negligence. The lessons I carried went beyond one company. I founded the Watchdog workshop, training small business owners in security awareness. In the first year, hundreds of entrepreneurs completed the program, each learning how to spot patterns, prevent theft, and protect their people. One bakery owner told me, "You didn't just save my store, you saved my family." That was worth more than any stock share. Meanwhile, Sentinel's security grew beyond anything I had imagined. 800 million in revenue, offices in 15 countries, contracts with governments and corporations alike. Yet our proudest work was with small businesses, democratizing protection so no family shop had to collapse the way mine nearly had. Then came the Medal of Honor. Standing at the White House, the president pinned it to my uniform. My unit filled the front rows, while my family's seats remained empty. But I didn't feel the hollowness I once did. Behind me stood soldiers I had saved, employees who trusted me, and civilians who owed me their lives, my real family. When the ceremony ended, reporters pressed me with questions. I simply said, "They once called me paranoid, the army called me watchdog. Today I call myself a protector, and that's enough." In my personal life, I found peace I never thought possible. Dr. Sarah Chen, a trauma therapist for veterans, became my partner. She understood hypervigilance not as a curse, but as a gift sharpened by pain. With her, I learned to trust without scanning every corner. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. 3 years later, Hannah called unexpectedly. Her voice trembled. "Dana, my daughter is being bullied. They say she's too suspicious, too strange. How did you survive being different?" For a moment, silence filled the line. Then I answered softly. I stopped trying to fit in. I started protecting what mattered. Tell her eyes are a gift, not a curse. Whether Hannah truly listened, I'll never know. But perhaps the cycle could break in the next generation. The legacy extended further. Miller Construction partnered with the VA to build veterans' housing. 50 families now lived under secure roofs, homes safeguarded with Sentinel technology. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the 100th home, veterans stood beside workers, their applause thundering. I looked at the sky that day, whispering to Grandpa, "We did it." As the crowd dispersed, I stood alone for a moment, the watch ticking at my wrist. It was late afternoon, the light slanting golden through the new housing units. The steady rhythm of the watch felt like the heartbeat of everyone I had fought for. Time had proven what my family refused to see. Vigilance wasn't sickness. It was salvation. Looking back, I realized I had never been broken. I had been forged. What they called paranoia was simply preparation, sharpened until it became my purpose. To all who hear this story, let me leave you with this. If you've ever been told you are too much, too cautious, too suspicious, remember, you're not broken. You may simply be in the wrong place, surrounded by the wrong people. Find those who need your gift and give it freely. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you peace and strength in your own battles. If this journey moved you, I invite you to subscribe for more stories, share your thoughts in the comments, and join me again as we honor those who turned rejection into resilience. Because the watchdog never sleeps, and neither should the truth.